Hello again, football fans, and welcome to another episode of Miners Live. We are back Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. For RFL All Night. RFL All Night. The RFL podcast will go live at or around 8:30 p.m. So Wednesday nights, Miners Live will get you started on everything you want to know, everything you need to know around the world of the RFL. And it all starts with Miners Live Wednesday nights at 7 and then rolling up to 8:30 tip off for the RFL podcast. So great to be back. Great to have you guys here. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please make sure to go ahead and do that. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you like what I have to say, if you hate what I have to say, well, then chances are you're going to want to comment about it. And in order to comment about it, you're probably going to subscribe to the channel. I don't even care if you hit the thumbs down button. Go ahead and hit the thumbs down button. It's fine with me. But as always, appreciate you guys checking in and plenty to talk about this week. One thing that I think all of you know at this point is that I'm not going to go through the week that was. I'm not going to just go over all of the games that we just had. You're going to get all of that in the RFL podcast. So I try to do something different. I'm not going to just sit here and go over the games and break down who won and who played well and who played like donkey. I'm more so going to give you guys the stuff around the RFL that you're not going to get in the headlines. So plenty to talk about tonight. You may or may not have seen the agenda for tonight's show. So if you haven't, I'll go ahead and slap that up here for you guys. Now, I did a couple weeks ago discuss some of the ARC teams that I feel like have no business playing in 2023 anymore. And at this point, they should just be mailing it in and playing for 24. So now I'm going to give equal opportunity to the NRC because there are just as many teams, if not more now, because it's 2 weeks later, in the NRC that have absolutely no business whatsoever even thinking or waking up in the morning with any sort of mindset that their team is a contender to make the Relo Bowl. And I understand. You know, a couple weeks ago, I forget exactly who it was. I think it was Coach Kupak said something like, I go into every game with the mindset of winning. Well, yes, that's understandable and that makes sense. And I expect you to go into every game wanting to win and possibly even thinking that you're going to win. But when you've not done that week after week after week, at what point do you look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, maybe 2023 is just not the year for me. And maybe I would be better served looking at my team from a high level, which is what we're supposed to be doing as not head coaches, but general managers, right? Looking at our teams from a high level and trying to figure out what is best for the team moving forward. And then we'll get into a little bit about the Houston Gunners. I've got some things about them. There's some trouble in Oklahoma City, and you'll hear what I have to say about the Oklahoma City Bisons. We took care of them this past week, so that's now a full sweep that we have over the Oklahoma City Bisons. And the locker room, let's just say, didn't take too well to losing both games this year to the Sacramento Miners. So I will have I'll have some thoughts on that. And then I'll also get into the trivia. I like to, at the end of the show, have a little fun with you guys and do something different. So I'll have a name that player and give you guys an opportunity to see if you can name that player. As you can see there, Eric Ashley, rookie left guard for the Sacramento Miners, pointing out to all of you Oklahoma City Bison fans that yes, indeed, it was a clean sweep in 2023. So what does that mean for the Bisons? Are they done? They were not one of the They were not one of the 3 teams that I mentioned a couple weeks ago in the ARC teams that are done. But perhaps now, if I were to do the ARC list, they would in fact be done. Very difficult road for the Bisons at this particular point to try to get into the postseason. But before I get into any of that, I like to start off every show with a little bit of a get off my lawn. And so today I'm going to talk to all of you out there who felt like after 3 weeks of the season, you knew what was going on. Or after 4 weeks of the season, you looked at the standings and you said to yourself, oh, yeah, I know exactly how this is going to play out. Because inevitably, every year that happens. Every single year, we get to week 3, week 4, maybe even week 5, and there are several people out there that become paper experts, I guess, if you will, and they look at the standings and they can predict what's going to happen. And every year you're wrong. Unless you say something obvious like, the Explorers are going to make the playoffs, which, spoiler alert, there's a chance that they don't make the playoffs this year. Just saying. It's a very, very slim outside chance, and I don't think it's going to happen, but there is a chance. What kind of story would that be if the defending Reload Bowl champions undefeated season didn't make the playoffs? That would be a huge story, not just in the NRC, but in the RFL as a whole. But one thing that we were talking about, a lot of people were looking at the standings and saying, wow, look at the Monarchs. Look at the London Monarchs. They get a new coach, and look at what happens. And what people weren't talking about ever were the Chicago Tigers. They were almost like an afterthought they were certainly an afterthought in the NRC. And you could even make a case that they were certainly an afterthought in their own division, right? When you look at the Tigers and you look at their division, they've got the Thunderbirds, they've got the Explorers. And for crying out loud, we spent more time talking about and concerning ourselves with the Brooklyn Barons than we did what was going on in Chicago with the Tigers. And I say all of that because now look at it. I've said, and I unfortunately, I didn't say this publicly. I said this in our miners locker room, and I've said this kind of to myself. I said, the Chicago Tigers are going to make the playoffs. Even if they lose both games to the Explorers that they have remaining, and they lose to the Thunderbirds, I still think that they make the playoffs. Well, guess what? They beat the Explorers, and the game before that, they beat the undefeated Elks. So, for my money, I'm going to be honest, I don't see the Tigers missing the playoffs at this point. Unless they get absolutely bombarded by the Barons, which I think they play the Barons the last game of the year. And if there's anything that you know about Roland, it's that he's going to play like he thinks he can win. And he's going to play week 18 like he has a chance to make the playoffs. And spoiler alert, he's not making the playoffs. Okay. The Barons are not making the playoffs. They weren't making the playoffs 3 weeks ago. They weren't making the playoffs 2 weeks ago. They're not making the playoffs now. Okay, so whatever he might say on his podcast about having the number 1 ranked defense or number 1 ranked rush defense and one of the best offenses in the league, I mean, okay, but your team still sucks, right? Like, I mean, I'll get into it in a little bit. But I just think it's about time that we stop looking at teams after 5 weeks and saying, this team is awesome or this team is terrible. because nobody was talking about the Chicago Tigers. Nobody. Even the Chicago Tigers players were not even that vocal in Discord necessarily, or certainly on other podcasts. The Chicago Tigers were an afterthought in their conference, in their division, and in Discord. Nobody was talking about them. Every single team in the NRC North was getting more run and more pub than the Tigers. And right now, if you look at the NRC North, it's unfortunate that the Tigers are even in that division, because if they weren't in that division, they would be second in the South, they would be second in the East, and they would be second in the West, with a clear path to possibly winning the South and possibly winning the West. Okay, the Steamers in the East at 11-0, not going to catch them. But instead, they're in the NRC North. They're in third with a record of 7-3. And they've got the Explorers ahead of them at 9-2 and the Thunderbirds ahead of them at 10-0. And it's unfortunate. And for all that we talk about the ARC North and how tight the ARC North is, you could make a case right now. It's not the ARC North that is the best division in the RFL. It's the NRC North. And quite honestly, I don't even think it's close. The Thunderbirds are 10-0, the Explorers are 9-2, and the Tigers are 7-3. That's the best division in the RFL. Period. The ARC North is great. It's very tightly contested. But you put the Tigers in the ARC North right now, and there's a good chance that the Tigers are in first place. If you put the Aviators, if you put the Huskies, if you put the Cougars, you put the Bulls in the NRC North, at best, they're in third, and chances are they're in last. I mean, I don't know how you can argue against it. We'll take a moment and go out to the chat here, see what we've got. I'm sure if we've got some ARC North people in here, they're probably not going to like that one. So here we go, Rohan. I don't know if Rohan's wrong here. Miners own the Bisons. I'm just saying. Yeah, Rohan. For those of you that don't know, Rohan is the Sacramento Miners numero uno, if you will. He is fanboy number one. He will probably tell you that he's a fan of the Condors as well, but he's lying. He just says that to piss me off. That's really what he does. He knows that the Miners are his number one team. But as always, Rohan, appreciate you. Appreciate the support. And, you know, I hope that we are not letting you down this season. And here we go, guys. Like I can't make this up. All right. So here's rolling, but next week, who knows? All right. So let's go ahead, and before I move on, there it is. Let's look at next week. So, let me see what do the Barons have next? It's going to be comical. Just throwing it out there, guys. This is probably going to be hysterical. They have the Steamers? Did I see that right? No, they just lost to the Steamers. Yeah, you want to talk about next week? You have an automatic win. The Barons are going to mess around and somehow lose the automatic win. Okay? That's how dysfunctional I feel like that franchise is right now. They don't know what to do at the quarterback position. They are delusional at the halfway point, and now even into the beginning of the second half of the season about their true identity. And then week 14, they've got the Thunderbirds. What are we talking about? They've got the Thunderbirds in week 14, then an automatic win, and then they've got the Explorers in week 16 before they have the Tigers in week 17. They finished their season with the 3 teams in the division that are already ahead of them, one of them which is undefeated, one of them which won the Relo Bowl last year, and one of them, the Chicago Tigers, who I just told you how I feel about them. So forgive me for thinking that the Brooklyn Barons are going to go 2-3. I'm sorry, 3-3 in their next 6 games. And that's only because the 3 are automatic wins. If they beat the Thunderbirds, great. Congratulations. It doesn't mean anything. If they beat the Explorers, great. Congratulations. It doesn't mean anything. And if you beat the Tigers, guess what? You probably knocked the Tigers out of the playoffs, but for you, guess what? It doesn't mean anything. Your season is over. And if you had recognized that in week 8, when it was the truth, you could have done something to position your team better for the future. Now, that being said, I guess I'll just go ahead and jump right into it. The NRC teams that I think have no chance of making the playoffs, the Brooklyn Barons are one of them. And for these exact reasons right here, I don't think that you can really argue it. They've got the Thunderbirds, the Explorers, and the Tigers still remaining on the schedule. The Wizards and the Gunners have the tiebreaker. Like, what left is there to talk about? Does anyone actually disagree? Like, look at this. Does anyone really disagree that the Barons are done? I don't see it. And I think that, and I know this, and I, nothing but love and respect for Roland. And, we go back and forth, and, you guys might be listening to this thinking, oh man, like Roland's got to be pissed. Roland, him and Dunn must hate each other. No, it's not like that. It's just, I say it like I see it. And the reality is, this is what the Barons are right now. I just wish that the front office had been able to look at this team and look at the remaining schedule and where their team was at 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. Because even if you go back 4 weeks ago, okay, right? Let's go back to week number 8, right? And I guess this is the problem. This is where the problem started, in my opinion, for Roland. Week 6, they had an automatic win. Week 7, they upset the Monarchs, right? This is back when all of you guys were on board with the Monarchs. Everybody was talking about the Monarchs, how they're going to make the playoffs for the first time, and what a dysfunctional franchise and what a great story it is. The Monarchs are postseason bound. Well, the Barons went in there and blew the doors off from 38-6. Okay. And then in week 8, the Barons went on the road to Portland and they beat the Snowhawks. So the problem was Roland went week 6 on the road, week 7 on the road, week 8 on the road, and won all of those games. Now, again, one of them was an automatic win, but at London and at Portland, both of those games put Roland in a position where he probably sat down and said, wow, wait a minute here. Okay, so now we're through week 8 and we are 4-4. All right, well, that seems like we could turn it around and have a chance, and maybe we can, right the ship, and the shoes can fall the right places and we can make the postseason. But the reality is, it should have never got to week 6, right? Like the Barons if it were me, I would have never let it get to week 6 before I stopped and I looked at this team. And if it were the Miners, I would have done the same thing. Before I stopped and looked at the Miners and said, you know what? I don't think 2023 is the year for me. I need to start looking at what we can do moving forward. Because if the Barons had done that in week 6, right? Week 1, they got railroaded by the Thunderbirds. Week 2 was an automatic win. Week 3, they got trounced by the Wizards, 45-27. And then week 4, they got the doors kicked in by the Tigers, 38-13. And then week 5, they got steamrolled by the Explorers. I didn't get steamrolled. They lost to the Explorers 28-24. So after 5 weeks of the season against 4 RFL teams, the Barons didn't have a single victory. It's right then and there that if I am running the Miners and the Miners are in that position, I'm already looking towards next season. All of my players are available. If somebody wants to, blow me away with offers, everyone is open for discussion. And certainly anybody that's got a high price tag that I don't have a huge cap hit, and anybody that's on a walk year is certainly open for debate. If you're a free agent at the end of the year and I've played 4 RFL games and I've lost all of them, guess what? You're on the trade block. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your dev trade is. I don't care what your overall is. If you're a high dev trait and a high overall, I might not be able to afford you. And I'm certainly not going to go into week 14, 15, 16 knowing that I can't re-sign a guy and he's going to walk at the end of the year and I'm going to get absolutely nothing in return. Except Anthony Fry. The good news is it would never get to the point where Anthony Fry would become a free agent because I'll just franchise tag him and not let him go. So I just, for me, the Barons, their season, their postseason hopes were over after week 5. And again, it's unfortunate because week 6, 7, and 8, they won, and week 8 is the trade deadline. And I'll be honest, Roland and I had conversations probably from weeks 4 through week 7 into week 8 about certain players on both of our teams. So I'll give him that he was engaging in conversations, but the problem is I was engaging him in conversations thinking he should be playing for the future. And our conversations couldn't get anywhere because that's not where he was at. And it's unfortunate because if you ask him, would he change it? Would he do something different? He might say, yeah. In week 5, when I was 1-4 and the only win I had was against an NFL team, which they barely won, by the way, an automatic win. Not that matters. Maybe he would have done something different. I respect coaches going for it, thinking that you're going to win. But you can find yourself on the hot seat and you can find yourself on the unemployment line really quick when you are incapable of looking at your franchise from a high level, right? Like think about the 30,000 foot view. Don't look at it from the sideline. Don't look at it from the playbook. Look at it from 30,000 feet in the air. And there he says, heck no, I wouldn't change anything. I don't know why you put a laughing emoji. If you're not going to change anything, well, then you're going to get fired. And that sucks. That's unfortunate. But like there are players on that team that I look at it this way, right? Like, so the minors last season, and AJ Pestock is the example. Last season, we had AJ Pestock, and he is a X factor middle linebacker. For those of you that don't know, in the RFL, if you have an X factor middle linebacker, that is awesome. It's incredible. X factor quarterback is better, but X factor middle linebacker is really good to have. And we had one. And he was, this year would have been AJ Pestock's walk year. I knew that between him and the other players that I had pending free agency last year and this year upcoming, I wasn't going to be able to afford all of them. I had to prioritize. And a 28-year-old middle linebacker who's staring down the barrel of regression was not my number 1, 2, or even 3 priority. So I traded him. Now, some coaches would never think of doing that in a million years. There are several coaches out there who, even if you so much as ask them about the availability of anybody on their team that is an X factor, they immediately rule it out and laugh at you. Some people only care about certain things. You only care about what you care about, right? I love X factors, but I had no problem getting rid of one who's going to cost too much money, is going to start regressing, and in doing so, I'm going to be able to get younger, and the draft capital that I get is probably going to be as good as AJ Pestock next year, or certainly 2 years from now. And then everything moving forward, AJ Pestock is, entering retirement conversations or certainly significant regression, right? Like, let's just say, for example, Killian Bain. As a matter of fact, I got an early second and a replacement middle linebacker in Chad Heath for AJ Pestock. Let's just use Killian Bain as an example, because he was my last pick in the first round. But had I taken him at 2-4, which is what I got for Pestock, had I taken Killian Bain at 204, the 4th pick in the second round, which he may have been there, I took him at 129. So he very easily could have been there at the 4th pick in the second round. If I took Killian Bain with that pick, I think Killian Bain is better than AJ Pestock at the end of 2024. And everything after that, he's only getting better and Pestock's only getting worse. Now, is Bain an X factor next year? No, of course not. Unless he does something astronomically ridiculous, and that's just probably not going to happen. I don't love the fact that we can no longer get breakout dev increases in season. It's unfortunate, in my opinion. I don't like it. But it's the rule. It is what it is. That's the rule that's in place. I guess I understand, where the front office is coming from and why things are a little bit different. There's automatic wins and players put up ridiculous numbers in automatic win games that might skew the stats and all that. I get it. But I just think it's made it a little bit more difficult moving forward for guys to get to that X factor point. And again, I've said this before, I don't want Killian Bain to be 21 years old, have 3 really good seasons, get to age 24 or 25, and then get X factor. Because at the age of 25, having X factor doesn't do nearly what it does if you have it at 21 or 22, which is why I just, I wish that guys were capable of entering the league with X Factor. I wish that it was a little bit easier for guys to get it, because I think it's just a little bit hard. But again, I completely understand. Guys are upgrading their players, and they're upgrading their players at incredible rates that at some point kind of makes it a little bit unfair for certain guys. So I completely understand why the rule is the way that it is. I just think that it's a little bit of a bummer, certainly for me, who had 3 first-round draft picks, and none of them even got star dev. I had 4 picks in the first 2 rounds, and the only one that got star dev was my second-round draft pick. So what's it going to take for some of those guys to dev up? And how old are they going to be once they finally dev up? I don't want Killian Bain to get superstar. I don't want Miles McCain to get X Factor at age 26. But if he has to ball out for 4 years in order to get it, then I guess that's what's going to happen. So I just think that, there's a lot of teams out there that could have done a better job of looking at their organization from a high level and doing something to position themselves for the future. So I went over the Barons. I think the Barons are out. I thought the Barons were out 2 weeks ago when the conversation came up in the coaches lounge about teams that are potentially out. That was like 3 weeks ago. And I had the Barons as one of my teams then. Nothing has changed in 3 weeks other than the fact that now I am 100% certain that the Barons are out. And okay, they're not mathematically eliminated. I don't want to hear mathematically whatever. There's a 0.001% chance that the Brooklyn Barons make the playoffs. Now, if you want to talk about mathematically eliminated, I do have a bit of breaking news for you guys. There is actually one team in the RFL who is technically mathematically eliminated. And that team I talked about a couple weeks ago is the Orlando Sentinels. This was them a couple weeks ago. I have a fantastic production staff. So for those of you that don't know, I got together with Coach Forbes and I got together with Mitchie, and I said, guys, and really Mitchie, I said, hey, why don't you focus the film room on film room stuff, which I know he wanted to do, but was having trouble doing because he was doing a show. I said, why don't you just come help me and basically be a producer for me, and then you can go and just do film room stuff. So for those of you that didn't know, I do have Forbes and Mitchie who are fantastic with putting numbers together and updating stats and everything throughout the league to help make this show better and to, at the end of the day, give you guys the best product, but also not have it so that you guys have to watch 17 podcasts every week, right? Like there's games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And then if there's a podcast on Tuesday, Wednesday, right? You've got RFL every single day. And while for some of us, myself included, that's fantastic. For a lot of you guys, you can get a little burnt out. And that's what I certainly don't want. And I don't think anybody else wants either. We don't want guys to get burnt out on the RFL or feel like they're overwhelmed with the amount of content and the amount of commitment that they have to put in. And so Mitchie and Forbes have been great. They've helped me put together some stuff. And so we, throughout every week moving forward, we will get together and we will basically have production meetings where we go over everything through the RFL. And I've always said to all of you guys, if you have questions or things that you would like to be discussed on the show, send me a message, reach out to me on Discord, and we can make it happen. So moving along, I just saw RFL's Colin Cowherd. Yeah, look, I mean, you guys want to come up with nicknames. There you go. I'll be the RFL's Colin Cowherd. Somebody said it a few weeks ago. Somebody said it last year. And I was like, you know what? I don't disagree at all. I'm a fan of Colin most of the time, just like I assume you guys are a fan of me most of the time. So yeah, I'll be the RFL's Colin Cowherd. So next up, the Brooklyn Barons. I'm sorry, it's a no for me. You're out. And the next team that I have from the NRC that has no chance of making the playoffs is the Oklahoma City Lancers. Right now, they are 4-6, but 3 of those wins are auto wins. They only have 1 RFL win the entire season. So why would I think that there's any possible way for them to make the playoffs? Their quarterback has a 17 to 15 touchdown to interception rate. That's not good. I'll go so far as to say that's terrible. It's not often that quarterbacks have just as many interceptions as they do touchdowns. And Trey Mason is very close. Very close. I know there has been rumblings of Fontenez getting some playing time. Is Joseph Fontenez the future at quarterback for Oklahoma City? I don't think so. Quite honestly, this is another one of those instances where if you're going to give Joseph Fontenez a chance to start as early as week 12 or week 13, then why didn't they entertain trading Trey Mason and getting something in return? I could probably look at Trey Mason and see what the contract is. It could be a very easy answer. He could have several years left on his contract that no one wanted to take. So what are we looking at? Where's the contract? Why doesn't it say? It doesn't. Oh, here it is. He's got 2 years left. So Trey Mason's got 2 years left on a 5-year deal. Could the Lancers have done something to move on from Trey Mason and give Fontenez that starting job in week 7 or week 8 and allow Fontenez more time to develop? Possibly. But then you have to ask yourself, is there a team out there that would have made a move for Trey Mason? Is there a team out there that sees Trey Mason as an upgrade over their current quarterback situation? Now, certainly you could look at a team that has a quarterback that's on a walk year. And if he's going to walk, you could make a trade for Trey Mason, have Trey Mason sit behind that guy, let that guy walk. And now you have Trey Mason implanted as your starting quarterback next year. And it would be his walk year in 2024. Like, there are some scenarios there. And so I just feel like, for me, if you're going to bring in Joseph Fontenez now, then it also makes sense to have possibly entertained the idea of starting Joseph Fontenez in week 8 or 9 and moving on entirely from Trey Mason. Because remember also, I believe Trey Mason had star dev or possibly even superstar dev, and now he's been dev down to normal. So, at star dev or superstar dev, even at the age of 31 and an 87 overall, Trey Mason has some significant trade value. But now at normal dev, at 31, probably stuck on 31, maybe at best Trey Mason gets to I'm sorry, stuck at an 87. He's an 87 overall, 31 normal dev. Maybe over the course of the remaining 2 years on that contract, he can go up 2 overalls. Maybe he can get to an 89 overall, but that's even a stretch. And again, that's assuming no regression at the end of this season. And when you look at the numbers, you can make a case for some significant regression. So again, I don't know that Fontenez is the future. I think the more likely scenario is you ride out Trey Mason and they draft a quarterback. And whoever they draft becomes the future. So for as much as we talked about last year or going into the draft this year, as much as we talked about the rookie quarterback draft class moving forward and how you don't want to be a quarterback entering the draft because there are just no teams out there that really need a quarterback. Most of the teams out there have their quarterback of the future, or there are some teams that have a backup quarterback that is going to be significantly better than whatever options might be there in the draft. And so for a quarterback entering the draft next year, it might be problematic. It could be very dicey. However, the Oklahoma City Lancers could be a team that takes the quarterback in the first round and starts him right away. Or if nothing else, they do exactly what a team like the Toronto Huskies are doing. Holden Wolf is on the Huskies. He's in his walk year. They draft Calvin Poole. They run with Holden Wolf. Calvin Poole takes over the following year. You have Trey Mason. You draft a quarterback in the first round. You run with Trey Mason. The quarterback you draft in the first round takes over the following year. The Oklahoma City Lancers could follow the same exact blueprint that the Toronto Huskies are implementing, or at least it seems like they are implementing at the quarterback position right now. So again, for me, the Oklahoma City Lancers, no shot. The third team in the NRC that I just don't envision a scenario for them making it to the postseason is the Orlando Wizards. Right now, you might look at the record and say, okay, what do you mean? They're 2 games above 500. We're in the second half of the season. Well, yeah, but 4 of those wins are automatic wins, which means of their 7 remaining games that they have on their schedule, only 1 of them is an automatic win. So they have a 2-4 record against RFL teams, and they have 6 remaining games against RFL teams. I just don't see it happening. If they went 4-2 in those remaining 6 games, that would get them to 11 wins. And I don't see them going 4-2 in those games when they still have to play the Diablos twice. They still have to play a team like the Condors. And I certainly don't see them getting in the playoffs when you look at a scenario, a potential, down the road scenario where they have to deal with tiebreakers. And you look at a team like the Snowhawks, who are significantly underperforming, but even the Snowhawks have the head-to-head tiebreak over the Wizards. So for me, I don't, when you look at this, like I'll go out to the chat here because I know I haven't done it in a while. And I know Forbes has got some stuff here. They didn't even have enough losses to be eliminated from playoff play. Why would you not play him? I think Smitty's talking about Mason. Why would you not? I think he's talking about Mason. They didn't even have enough losses to be eliminated from playoff play. Why would you not play him? I assume you're talking about Mason. I'm not saying that Mason should have been sat. I'm saying if you move to Fontenez now, you could have looked at the situation 3 weeks ago and thought long-term, realistic approach long-term, that they're probably not going to make it, and then make the move then and give him more time. I don't think that that's what should happen with the Lancers at all. I think Mason should be the quarterback. I don't think Fontenez is the answer. I don't think Fontenez is the future. I honestly don't think if I were running that organization, I don't think Fontenez starts a game. Because if it's me, I roll with Mason the rest of the season, and then I draft a quarterback, and then I either have the quarterback competition, or if it's a first round quarterback, I start that quarterback week 1 of 2024. Fontenez was a great user. I don't know how active he is anymore, if at all. And I certainly don't think that the overall has come up enough and he's done enough to warrant replacing Mason. I mean, if you bring Fontenez in at quarterback instead of Trey Mason, right? Like, we're talking Trey Mason is an 87. And yes, I get the dev decrease. That sucks. And I understand that he's 31 years old. And that's not ideal for, XP upgrades. And it lends itself towards regression. But Fontenez, where are we looking at here? Fontenez, what's Fontenez's overall? Where's the roster here? We got to go back. Somebody have it here. If somebody gets it before me. He's a 71. So Fontenez's overall is a 71. I don't start Fontenez. I roll with Mason. I just think, maybe something can happen. And if for no other reason, it's not about no Fontenez love. I mean, look, I'll be the first. Guys, I started a 70 overall quarterback. So I can understand if you want to throw shade, go ahead. Why am I poo-pooing on Joseph Fontenez being a 71 overall, saying I wouldn't start him when I turned around and I started a 70 overall? I get it. You can say that. You can have that conversation. But the reality of the situation is that conversation lasts all of 30 seconds because I own you when I tell you Miles McCain is significantly better than Joseph Fontenez. And the debate just ends there. Credit to Fontenez for boosting his player up, because I believe, if memory serves, he was a 6th round draft pick. I think he entered the league at a 67 overall, maybe even a 66 or a 65 overall. So he's certainly done everything that he can. I just think that, and this is the number one reason for me. I roll with Trey Mason the rest of the season because I hope that Trey Mason can do something for the rest of the season to boost his value. And then in the offseason, I can look around and I can entertain the idea of other teams out there that might need an upgrade at quarterback. Other teams out there that don't have early draft capital and aren't going to get a good quarterback. And find that team and make a deal to trade Trey Mason to that team. And then if you want to roll with Fontenez, okay, fine. But let Fontenez start the season. And that's the other flip side of it. Maybe something can happen. They have 6 losses right now, but again, I believe they'd have to win of their remaining 6 games. I forget what it was. I had it a minute ago. Regardless, I don't want to spend too much time on the Lancers, but again, if it were me, that's where I would be going. I would be playing Mason, one, because he's the better quarterback, but also because hopefully he can do something. And maybe there's another team out there that might give you something for him. And I know that there's tons of teams out there that already have their quarterback. I know. I was dying on that hill last year. I was the one in the college series, during the college series, who told every single college quarterback or every single incoming recruit, don't create a quarterback. You're going to be a 5th round draft pick. You're never going to get any playing time. And then you're going to quit the league and you're going to think that the league is no fun. Don't create a quarterback. And we'll see what happens come draft day. But I promise you, there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of user quarterbacks, probably 5 or 6 of them, that lose their mind because they get drafted in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. And they are a backup. And they are looking at being a backup for 3 or 4 years. Those guys aren't going to stick around. I hope they do. I know Smitty hopes they do. Every coach in the league hopes they do. The RFL is built on users. The RFL is built on you guys. All we ever want is for you guys to stay in the league. But that's not always the case. And we want you guys to be put in a position to succeed. And being put in the best position to succeed is finding the positions that the league needs, not building yourself at the position that you think is sexy or you think is going to be an early draft pick. Because while in the real world, you might get 4 quarterbacks taken in round 1. In the RFL, you don't. You're lucky if you get 2. All right, so we've got next up, we'll move along here. I've got some other stuff I want to get into. The Dublin Shamrocks. Listen, I just don't see it. I feel like this team has aptly hit rock bottom. They've only got 1 win in RFL play. They've got 1 NRC win. If they have the same exact record at the end of the year as the Barons and the Elks, the Barons and the Elks have the tiebreak. Listen, if you're talking about a scenario where you're worried about a tiebreaker with the Brooklyn Barons, your season's over, right? Like, I don't think that I need to go into that much further. They've still got to play the Diablos and the Steamers. They're 4-6 right now. But the reality of the situation is that if you've got to look down the road at a potential tie-break scenario with the Brooklyn Barons, and you don't even have that, no, you're done. You're playing for 2024. And I know that sucks. I get it. This league is built on a real life schedule. And I know many of you probably wish that we didn't do that. And we played 4, RFL weeks every week. And we rolled through a lot quicker. But we don't. And so because it is set up that way, a lot of you guys like to, I guess, play to the final whistle. And even when you're completely eliminated, you still want to win just because you think you have a chance. But the reality is, maybe you should be playing for the future. And I know the future is literally 7 or 8 months away. And that's hard to look that far ahead. But I promise you, the best organizations in this league do that. Or they've just never had to worry about it because their team has just been so good from the jump. But I promise you, and I'll even look at our team, for example. I did not anticipate entering week 12 and knowing that worst case scenario, the Sacramento Miners are going to have 10 wins this season. That's absolute worst case scenario. It is physically impossible for the Miners to have fewer than 10 wins. I did not anticipate that. I thought this year was going to be a lot more of a struggle. And so for me, this team's only getting better. Look at the youth. And that's where I look at some of these teams that trade away all their future draft picks, and they're not perennial contenders. They're middle of the road. They're, every year they're scraping into the wild card. They're begging to get into the wild card, but yet they're trading away all their future assets for an 85 overall star dev, 32-year-old outside linebacker. Like, I don't understand why you would ever do that. It took me less than 1 year. We'll say it took 1 year. The Miners won the division 2 years in a row. There's a chance that the Miners might win the division 3 years in a row. And we got rid of our superstar, got demoted to star dev quarterback, and superstar linebacker got promoted to X Factor linebacker. And right now, the team's in-game overall is better than it ever was the last 2 years. Now, again, the guys are young and they're building and, whatever. I just think the short-sighted nature of certain franchises puts them in a position to be mediocre and middle of the road for 4 or 5 years. You have to be willing, and maybe this is just me, but I'm a firm believer in that you have to be willing to blow it up. You have to be willing to suck for 1 year in order to build yourself up to something bigger and better. And when you look at the heavy hitters in the RFL, mediocre isn't going to get the job done. It's not. You need more. And let's be honest, who wants to settle for mediocrity anyway? Being mediocre sucks. It's boring. It's middle of the road. I've been better than mediocre the last 2 years. And guess what that got me? A division title and a first-round exit. And Smitty and Bill and Rob will be the first ones to tell you. I was a rookie coach. I've won the division every year I've been in this league. I've won my division. Doesn't matter. I won't get an attaboy. I won't get a nothing. Because we get bounced in the first round. You can't get bounced in the first round. You've got to be able to take that next step. And that's why I did what I did for the Miners. And I would just like to see other coaches and other general managers swallow that pill and do the same exact thing. It's tough. I get it. All right. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about was a team that I didn't mention being out of the playoff hunt and having no shot whatsoever. But I do think is very intriguing right now, and that is the Houston Gunners. So entering this year, we all know the Houston Gunners had the number 1 overall pick. They drafted Tyler Cage. He's playing fantastic. He's playing well. But they traded away tons of draft capital, and they basically mortgaged the future for a win now mentality. Well, they're not winning now. They're not going to win the Reload Bowl, which they went to. They went to the NRC championship game last year. This team is going further backwards than they are forward. And so it was interesting to me what they were going to do with the quarterback situation, because they have Jabri Jackson on the roster, and he entered this season as a pending free agent. This was Jabri Jackson's walk year. And there was conversation and there was speculation and there was discussion with other coaches about Jabri Jackson. Is there a team out there that wants Jabri Jackson? There was several conversations prior to the draft about Jabri Jackson. Would the Gunners trade Jabri Jackson, draft a quarterback, and what could that look like? Entering a walk year. Doesn't look like the team was going to re-sign him. So all of that has changed. All of that has changed because the Houston Gunners did re-sign Jabri Jackson. And I'm going to pull it up here. Let's find... Let's find the Gunners. So Jabri Jackson re-signed with the club on a 2-year extension. So he's with the team the rest of this year plus 2 more seasons. So what does that say about the Gunners? Do they look at their team right now and think, all right, you know what? This year was just an anomaly. There was a lot of turmoil, a lot of new faces. Obviously, going from a user coach team to a non-user coach team, all of that. There was a lot for the Gunners to deal with. Is it as simple as saying, you know what? It is what it is. Let's just get through this year. Let's re-sign Jabri Jackson. We got him for 2 more years. He'll be 33 when he's in his walk year again. And we just look at what we can do for those final 2 years. You have to assume that is the mindset of the Houston Gunners. We're talking about an X-Factor quarterback. He's 96 overall. I said he was 31. He's actually 32. So he'll be 34 years old when he is in his walk year after this extension. He'll be at the age of 34, certainly looking at possible regression. But I don't know that this is the wrong decision for the Gunners. Right? Like, I understand entertaining the thought of trading him before the draft. Look, the Gunners could have traded him. And if the right team came along and the right offer was there, the Gunners could have traded Jabri Jackson, possibly gotten some draft capital, and then with the first overall pick, maybe they took Calvin Poole. There was a lot of people out there that thought they might take Calvin Poole anyway. So certainly, if Jabri Jackson was gone, and maybe the Gunners were able to get a mid-first round pick and something else, I think if you're trading for Jabri Jackson, the only way the Gunners make that trade is if they're getting draft capital, because they traded away all of their draft capital. So you have to assume that if Jabri Jackson was on the trade block before the draft, the Gunners were looking for draft capital. And maybe that was 2 first-round picks. Not a lot of teams had that. Maybe it was a first and a second. Maybe it was a first this year and a first next year. I don't know. And I don't know what teams were in discussion with Jabri Jackson. I will say this. I had conversations with the Gunners. I fielded a phone call from the Gunners asking me if I wanted Jabri Jackson. And I said no. Because for me, I knew what I was doing for the future and the long term. And I didn't even ask. I remember this specifically. I didn't even ask what the asking price was for Jabri Jackson, because I knew I wasn't willing to give it. I'm assuming, and I don't know if this is something that Smitty would ever divulge, certainly on the show, but maybe this is something that he would divulge to me in private, with complete anonymity. I don't know what the asking price for Jabri Jackson was or would have been, but I know that if it was a first round pick, I wasn't going to give it up. I had the 29th pick in the first round, and I don't think that I would have given up the 29th pick in the first round for Jabri Jackson. Now, is Jabri Jackson worthy of the 29th pick in the first round? Yes, absolutely. I just wasn't going to do it based on my team and my approach and my philosophy and where we were going. Anthony Fry and I had spent hours on end leading up to the draft. I think there was one night where we spent 2.5 hours on the phone. I knew what I wanted to do. He was on board with that. We knew what we wanted to do, and we were going to stick to our game plan. And as much as Jabri Jackson is an upgrade over Caleb Brown at the time, this is pre-draft, as much as an upgrade over Caleb Brown as he is, and even as much of an upgrade as he is over Chum Lee, it didn't matter to me because I will say this. If I had made that trade, I don't think that Jabri Jackson puts the Miners in a position where they are top dog in the ARC right now. It's a new quarterback. I've got to figure out his best play style. And is that going to work with what I want to run? And now I've got to test out a million other playbooks, which, yes, I understand I had to do anyway because I had a rookie quarterback. But it's a lot easier to game plan and analyze playbooks for a rookie quarterback than it is an X Factor 96 overall with ridiculous expectation. And that's why I say that. There's not a lot of expectation when you have a rookie quarterback. And I'm certainly ruling out immediately certain playbooks that you just know are not going to be good playbooks for a rookie quarterback. It's easier for me to identify some of those and rule those out. With Jabri Jackson, all bets are off. Every playbook is open, and you've got to figure out which one's going to work best. And that just wasn't for me. It wasn't for us. It wasn't what we were going to do. But it is genuinely, I am genuinely curious what the asking price would have been for Jabri Jackson. Because they could still trade him. I don't think, actually at this point, I don't think that they could because the cap hit, is just so high that it wouldn't make sense for the Gunners to trade him. At this point, Jabri Jackson is going to be the quarterback for the Houston Gunners through this season and for the next 2 seasons. And then after that, he will not be. Everything that I just said is plain and simple, cut and dry. Like that will not deviate. And if it does, I'm going to be mind blown. Jabri Jackson will finish the season a Gunner. He will play next season a Gunner, and he will play the season after that as a Gunner. And then the season after that, he will be gone. He won't be on the roster. He won't be there as a backup. He will be gone. And he'll probably get the same exact treatment that Holden Wolf got. Maybe not Holden Wolf because I don't think he was picked up as a free agent. I think he was traded. He'll be one of those older, starting to regress quarterbacks in free agency that maybe some team takes a flyer on because they have a quarterback that's just not working out. Take a look here. What we got? Anything? Holden Wolf was signed out of free agency. Okay, so I was right originally. Jabri Jackson could very easily find himself in the same position as Holden Wolf. That aging quarterback, phenomenal career. He's in a walk year with the Gunners. They're not going to re-sign him. unless for some reason he's asking for such little amount of money. They'll probably have already drafted a quarterback for the future. And so Jabri Jackson will be gone. Now, the only way that that doesn't happen is if they trade him. But again, the cap hit for trading Jabri Jackson is a lot, right? So, I mean, I can look it up. I think I had it a second ago. It looks like the cap hit on trading Jabri Jackson is $16 million. So that's eating $16 million to cut him. Now that will change if you trade him further along into the contract. But as of right now, it looks like if they were to trade Jabri Jackson, it would cost them $16 million to do so. So I don't hate what the Gunners did with Jabri Jackson. To be perfectly honest, I think it's the best thing that they could have possibly done for this organization. Again, we're talking about a team that was arguably the best team in the league last year. There's nobody out there that can have an educated thought about mentioning the top 5 teams in the RFL last year and exclude the Gunners. You can't do it. There's no top 5 list from last season where the Gunners are not in it. So this team is there. They have the ability to get there. And while they don't prolong their window for the future, they do prolong their window, right? Because we were looking at the idea of Jabri Jackson leaving at the end of the year, or possibly them trading Jabri Jackson before the draft, or at some point this season before the deadline. That didn't happen. They re-signed him. He's got 2 more full seasons. So what they've done basically is they've extended the window, right? Like their window to many of you may have looked like 2023. That was their window. If they didn't win this year, well, then they were going to have to do something, and it was going to be a few more years before they got back to that level of respect or that level of clout in the league. But now what they've done is they've extended that window by 2 years. And now it's only 2 years. And because they got rid of all the draft capital, they don't have a lot of draft picks that they're going to be able to acquire over the next 2 years to put themselves in a good position after those 2 years. And so they're banking on this window and this window only for right now. But just imagine how good Tyler Cage might be 1 and even 2 years from now. I'm just saying. All right. So the Houston Gunners re-signing Jabri Jackson. I don't know that was widely known. Perhaps that was announced somewhere. I'm not exactly sure when that happened. I'd have to check the transaction logs on the NRC, and maybe that's something that I can get Forbes or Mitch to do. Check that transactions log for the NRC and find out when that re-signing was. But I do feel like everything that the Gunners have done, given the hand that they were dealt, I think is the right thing. I think keeping him was the right move, unless you were going to get blown away with a trade offer, which obviously they weren't. And quite honestly, I don't know if there's any team. I probably was the number 1 target for the Gunners. I don't think that there's a team out there that the Gunners were hoping to be trade partners with more than the Miners. Why do you say that? Well, we didn't have a quarterback, and we had 3 first-round draft picks. We were literally the best possible trade partner for the Houston Gunners to trade Jabri Jackson. 3 first-round draft picks and no starting caliber quarterback on the roster. And again, I never even asked what the going rate was. I never even asked what the asking price was. And now I kind of wish that I had, just because I'm curious. Was it 2 first round picks? Was it all 3 of my first round picks? What were the Houston Gunners going to expect me to give them for Jabri Jackson? All 3 first round picks? They may have asked for it. I would have never done it. The closest I would have come to entertaining that is my last pick in the first round and like maybe a player on my team or a third round pick. I wasn't going to give up 2 first round picks for it. I just wasn't. So shout out to the Gunners. I like the move. It's a $40 million cap penalty. Okay, so it looks like Neon Sports is not correct or not updated, or just maybe I was reading it wrong. It's a $40 million cap penalty for the Gunners right now to trade Jabri Jackson. So obviously that's not going to happen. You don't re-sign someone and then trade them that offseason. All right, so like I said, Jabri Jackson will be the starting quarterback for the Houston Gunners for the rest of 2023, all of 2024, and all of 2025. And if you are a Houston Gunners fan, that is your window. Go buy your hats, go buy your jerseys, go buy your stickers, go buy your water bottles and your coffee mugs. Get all the swag and all the gear you can, because 3 years from now, it's going to be outdated and your team is going to be outdated. All right. And then we've got about 10 minutes left before the RFL podcast tonight. So I do want to spend some time here and go over the debacle, I guess I will say. Maybe not debacle. I guess that's a harsh word. Debacle is maybe what happened with the Brooklyn Barons earlier in the season. Sorry, this isn't even it's not, that's from previously. It's not what I was talking about. The Oklahoma City Bisons, right? So they lost. For those of you that don't know, the Oklahoma City Bisons lost to the Sacramento Miners. Thank you. I appreciate the applause. I appreciate all of that. They've now been swept by us this year. That did not sit very well with the locker room of the Bisons. Now, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And I give everybody, you guys know this, dating all the way back to last year, I give everybody the opportunity to speak your piece and say what you want to say, defend yourself, if you will. But I don't think now is the time for dudes in the locker room to be calling out how the team is run or the offensive play calling. I just don't. And quite honestly, I certainly don't think there's a rookie that should be spouting off at the mouth about his team's performance. And yes, for those of you that don't know, I'm talking about Alvin Mack. I know you're not going to like it, but the reality of the situation here is that you didn't have realistic expectations for the season. And this is a problem that I think a lot of rookies have. And maybe if you haven't had it yet, you'll have it. When you come from the college series, especially when you come from the college series and you have success, and if you have team success, Forget about it. If you have team success in the college series and you enter the RFL, you do so with this sort of, yeah, what? Get off me. You all do. A select few of you, maybe not. A select few of you, maybe less so than others. I've seen you guys in Discord. I've seen you guys on the RFL podcast. I've seen you guys here. Everyone has an ego. And 75 to 85% of you love talking smack. But when you're a rookie that gets drafted to a team that isn't really anything special to begin with, what are your expectations? So, like, let's go back 12 weeks, right? And let's sit down with Alvin Mack at his desk. And let's ask Alvin Mack, hey, Mr. Mack, what are your expectations for this season? What do you think is going to happen with the Oklahoma City Bisons? What do you think that conversation, what do you think those results were? Do you think Alvin Mack said, we're going to win the division? Do you think Alvin Mack said, we're going to sweep the Miners? We're going to win every game in our division? Playoffs, we miss it by one game? I don't even think that's what he really said. I think that's what he's saying now, because that's best case scenario, what's going to happen. And listen, missing the playoffs by one game, that could mean a lot. Missing the playoffs by one game tied with 5 other teams who all have a tiebreak ahead of you, well, that's not really missing the playoff by one game. Finishing last place in your division because you got swept by multiple teams in the division ahead of you, well, it's not really missing the playoffs by one game. Okay, and so, all right, fine. Let's go there. I see you, Frankie. And so let's do this. Let's say the Bisons had, first of all, had is past tense. So are you saying that they no longer have a decent team? The Bisons have a decent team that could possibly contend, and Mack was obviously a great addition. Only question was Joseph Torres' consistency and or inconsistency. Okay, great point. And I'm glad that you brought that up, Frankie. So why don't I go to the tape? Why don't I go back to the press conferences from this past weekend? Let's have some fun. The Bisons have a decent team. The Bisons have a chance to contend. Alvin Mack is a great addition. The question mark is Joseph Torres. So when we go to the press conference after losing to the Miners, mind you, by 3, okay, we're not talking about the Bisons getting, whooped. I didn't go and beat them by 14 or 17 or 21. We won by 3. All right. So immediately following the game, we've got Alvin Mack in the locker room, in the press conference. I'm frustrated as ever right now. These are direct quotes. I'm frustrated as ever right now. I'm not taking anything away from Coach Dunn and the Miners. The execution on that last drive was flawless. It was pretty good. Shout out to Miles McCain. If there's one thing that Miles McCain is proving, aside from the fact that he's should win Rookie of the Year, it's that not only should he win Rookie of the Year, he is clutch. I've done a little project to go back and try to find out how many times in the fourth quarter, either down by one possession, tied, or up by one possession or less, Miles McCain has led the team down the field in the fourth quarter and put points on the board. Because he's done it several times, and it's impressive. And he did it in this game. The Bisons had a chance to win this game until Miles McCain got the ball late in the fourth quarter and said no. But I'm frustrated as ever right now. I'm not taking anything away from Coach Dunn and the Miners. The execution on that last drive was flawless. But as a organization, have to start owning these losses and get better from them. Okay, so to me, that's calling out the front office. As an organization, the organization has to get better. The organization's trying to get better. That's why they drafted you. That's why they brought you in. Then this gets even better. There's nothing more comical, in my opinion, than one player on the Bisons in a press conference asking questions so that another player on the Bisons can answer it. Like, guys, if you are asking questions for your own teammate to answer, that's a problem. So Joseph Torres, who, again, I don't have to say it. Frankie's already said it. Many of you guys have already said it throughout the season and the last couple seasons, is consistent/inconsistent at best. For Joseph Torres to then, in the press conference, Mac, what do you think went wrong? And how do you and your team plan to attempt a late playoff push? I'm sorry, are you no longer on the team, Torres? How do you and your team? Don't you mean you and our team? You're the starting quarterback of the team. If there's anybody that's going to say it's their team, meaning your team, it's you. You are the quarterback. You are the head. You are the one that everyone looks to, the one that everybody should rally around. For you to be asking questions to your rookie middle linebacker is part of the problem. You should be providing solutions and answers and helping your rookie linebacker. What do you think went wrong? I could probably tell you what went wrong. Your season is mediocre. You've got empty yards. You want to talk about putting up 300 against us? Fine. You put up, ironically enough, I don't know if you're aware of this, you put up 1 yard less than you did the last game. Guess what? You lost them both. Empty yards don't mean anything. You also put up 3 touchdowns in this game. But when you can't run the ball, when you've got no running game, I know that's not on you, but you are the quarterback of this team. Like, what sense does it make for the quarterback of a team to go into a press conference and ask a question to the linebacker on his team and not even address it as him being part of the team? Mac's response: I think we didn't finish the fight tonight, or in boxing terms, the Miners took us to the deep end and we drowned. I don't think that's a boxing term. That sounds more like a swimming term, but I digress. I just think that there's a lot more going on. And I know I've talked to Mac since this. There's, I believe, 6 users on that squad. And he's really the only one. Torres a little bit, but is at this point, how much good is Torres doing versus bad? They've got to get on the same page, and they've got to get on the same page quickly. All right, so that's going to do it for me tonight, guys. I know great RFL podcast coming up. I think just now, probably guys dipping in there to get in there, probably starting up in just a minute. So as always, guys, appreciate it. If you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way you'll get all the notifications on future episodes. Again, Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. We'll take you right up into the RFL podcast. For Forbes and Mitchie, my executive producers, thank you so much for everything. For all of the viewers and listeners out there, I appreciate you as always. If you have any questions, feel free to send them to me on Discord, or you can hit me up on Twitter at MinersRFL. Also on Instagram a little bit at Miners RFL. So until next time, guys, I am your head coach and general manager of the Sacramento Miners, Coach Chris Dunn. Wishing you a good night and enjoy the RFL podcast. We'll see you next time, everybody.